Okay, thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us here at the June Erie FPAC General Meeting. And this is the second of 4 events that we have in our quarterly speaker series. In tandem with the busy summer months, as we've been seeing and participating in, some of us, for producers across the county and across the state and across the country, we too have been very busy here at the Erie FPAC, and we've been working on projects spanning from picnics to solar energy, and we're really excited to talk about them here today. But more than anything, to hear from Miss Olivia Heibuck, who is a public health educator at the Erie County Department of Health. She's going to be talking about health equity and showcasing some of the health disparities in our community and how historical redlining practices have had multi-generational community health impacts, here in Erie. I personally am extremely excited to hear her story and the story of Erie, I think it is. And basically, here's kind of the layout of our schedule today. We're going to have a few updates from our policy and education subgroup committees. We're going to have a presentation from Olivia. Then we'll have a Q&A for her and everyone else that's here today. And you can drop your questions in via the chat bar, or you can raise your hand, or message myself or Alex or anyone really, and we'll open the floor up for discussion. And you can ask Olivia your questions through us or through the chat bar or through your own unmuted self. So we're trying to speed things along. So as we get started here, I guess we're just going to start with a reminder, first of all, that nominations for the Erie FPAC leadership team can be made anytime during this meeting from the floor, or via written email by Friday, June 11th, which is this Friday, by 5 p.m. So the process that will continue after that is an anonymous survey voting will take place the week of June 14th, and then we will announce new officers at the July 14th meeting. So that'll be a month from now. Some of you will be hearing from me, I guess. We still have nominations out there that are either unconfirmed or being debated. So we still have some plates shifting in the tectonic plates of who's running for what, but really excited to get those nominations secured and get the elections underway. So without further ado, I guess I'll throw the baton over to Alex at the policy subgroup committee, and we'll start with some updates there.
Okay, hi everybody. Just some quick updates. Hi Jillian, from the policy subcommittee, and we had our meeting last week. Minutes will be coming out soon with more detailed information. Picnic in the park, that is a go. I shared at the last meeting that we'll be having events in the city of Erie, Northeast, Corey, and Edinboro. So if anybody has any ideas of activities that your organization may want to offer at those events, please reach out to me and I can get you in touch with the event coordinators. As soon as we finalize the activities, we'll be able to put together a flyer with the dates and times and activities available at each event. And then our communications team is going to help with promotion. The other thing that I wanted to share very quickly is a big thank you to Celeste and Sophia for coming up with our lovely Picnic in the Park logo. So that will be our Erie FPAC's Picnic in the Park. That's how it'll be promoted. And then the other big thing we talked about at our policy subgroup meeting was on solar energy and land preservation in Northwestern Pennsylvania. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie.
Hello, everyone. So like Alex said, we had talked about solar industrial scale solar. So the idea here is that we're not for or against industrial solar. I mean, obviously we understand that, clean energy is a must in order for us to reach our climate goals. But the thing in regards to this area is it's a large scale solar development, industrial development, which is going to use large tracts of land in southern Erie County and Crawford County. And the company is looking to develop mainly on agricultural land because the land is pretty open. I'm right across the border from Erie County into Crawford County, and our township in itself has no zoning. So we're kind of being, I don't want, targeted is a very strong word, but that's kind of what it feels like. So the idea being behind this meeting is to really bring some attention and education around food and land access and what it could mean, for our economy in the future, especially since we are on the cusp of a food movement. We're all working towards the same goal of fresh local food that is sustaining our area. And if we a large part of that is developed industrial, then that decreases the opportunities that we have for that. So really, we're just communicating and exploring ways to bring the attention around all of this. Again, solar is a wonderful thing to have. I have solar panels myself. I'm all for it. It's just on an industrial size level, the profit goes to, or the benefit really goes to profit those, developing and making the money from it, who are selling it, versus, the local community. So really working to develop material around education and, any questions that people might have around leasing and transparency. And yeah, that's about it so far. More to come on that, I'm sure.
There will
Great,
be,
thank you.
there will be a much
And
more.
as far as updates on the education committee, we've also been working on our involvement with the Picnic in the Park event. We actually have a work party happening tomorrow at Frontier Park from 9 to 11 at the amphitheater. We are asking people educational materials around.
Steph, I think your connection might be cutting out for most of us. If you wouldn't mind, it was there for a while. But if you wouldn't mind calling in.
Yeah, today. And the other update we've been working on, had Gannon, we've been lucky enough to have Gannon assess.
Looks like we lost her.
Yes.
She might have to call back in. Apologies for the technical difficulties there, but she has a very intense storm surrounding her as of right now. I don't know about the rest of you, but it is 80 and sunny right here, and she has a massive thunderstorm. It sounded like her house was struck by lightning just before she joined the call. But hopefully she'll be coming back and can do that via phone. But I was just going to say that the topics that she's talking about, Katie says it's crazy out here. The topics that she's referring to are all being discussed in separate meetings as well. And if anyone is interested in participating in those discussions or just learning more, we have the policy subgroup committee meetings as well as separate discussions. And you can reach out to any of us, myself, Marty, Alex, Steph, and we will get you the Zoom link to join those meetings. Alex, I know you were going to mention something as well. I just wanted to give you the opportunity.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there's a typo on the agenda. It will be fixed in the meeting minutes, but the next policy subgroup meeting is July 1st at 1:30 via Zoom. So there will be a reminder and an agenda that comes out prior to that, but great. Yeah, just so everyone knows, I think it says June 10th or something like that. That's incorrect. It'll be July 1st.
Fantastic, thank you. Sounds like Steph might be joining us again. But till that point, does anyone have any questions or want to discuss those topics? We have a couple more minutes as Steph is reconnecting. I guess I'll talk about it a little bit or speak on the solar panel point that Stephanie is making. Oh, here she might be once again. Stephanie, can you hear us okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
We can, yes, thank you. Did you call in via phone?
I did. I'm sorry. We are in the middle of a crazy thunderstorm and yeah.
No worries, no worries. We can hear you actually quite crisply. So if you'd like to continue, go ahead.
Sure. I'm not quite sure what everybody got from me, but last thing I was talking about was the walking assessment that we were doing to gauge the assets of different neighborhoods in the city. And we had Gannon students going out and conducting the walking assessment, and they've wrapped up for the year. So we should be receiving a report on that soon. And that is what I have for updates.
Fantastic. That's exciting news that they were able to accomplish that. And we're looking forward to that report.
Yeah.
Unless we have, yeah. Unless we have any other discussions about the subcommittee meeting updates, open the floor for that. If not, we'll move on to the highlight of the evening, which is this is Olivia Hybeck from the Erie County Department of Health. So Olivia, if you wouldn't mind, we'd love to hear what you have to say. I don't know if you need to screen share, if you need any kind of permissions or whatever, but take it away.
Okay, it looks like I'm good to screen share, which is good. All right, share and from beginning. Okay, are you seeing the presentation or are you seeing my notes?
We can see your notes and all.
I don't want you to see my notes. Okay, swap that around. Screen share over here. Now what are you seeing?
Just the PowerPoint, not in presentation mode.
Oh boy, okay.
Which is fine with us, but
Mm,
I know that's not what you're going for.
not what I'm going for. You would think that after doing this literally all day, every day for my entire existence, it feels like I would be pretty good at this point.
Just
but-
turn off presenter view. There you go.
There, it's
There
working.
it is, right there.
Okay, great. And will it? Yep, good. All right, we're good. Okay. I do want presenter view though, so I can see my notes. Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. My name's Olivia Hybeck, which Gabriel mentioned, and I work as the Health Equity Coordinator for the Erie County Department of Health. If you're sort of confused about what that encompasses, you're in good company. I called my grandma yesterday and mentioned that I was speaking to the Food Policy Advisory Council today, and she said, I don't really understand what that has to do with your job. I said, okay, well, grandma, everything kind of has to do with my job. And by that, I mean, there isn't one piece of the puzzle that yields the complicated outputs that's a person's lifelong health outcomes. There's nothing that we see in Erie County that isn't impacted by health equity and health disparities. So today I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the health disparities in our community and the social determinants of health, and how historical lending practices have contributed to the system of inequities that we currently live in. Okay. So I hope today yields some takeaways that you can apply to your personal work. And so the first question that needs to be answered is, what is health equity? We're cautioned against applying the lens of equality to our work because equality is a framework that's only salient when we all start at the same place with the same resources and the same lived experiences. Equality is giving everyone in the neighborhood a bicycle so they can bike for recreational activity. So especially when we engage in policy work, we have to be careful not to apply that equality lens because we end up selling ourselves and our community short. It's all well and good to give everyone a bicycle, but if we haven't figured out what people need to be able to use those bicycles, then all they have is something they can't use. So let me make that a little bit more concrete. A program that exists. If we know that we want to increase the percentage of seniors who are accessing healthy foods by shopping at farmers markets. And so we advocate for the creation of a senior farmers market nutrition program that subsidizes the cost of produce. We've removed a barrier to accessing healthy foods. At this point, folks should have the financial means to purchase foods. That's equality. However, there's a baseline assumption there that people will live within walking or driving distance to a farmer's market and have access to reliable transportation, or that they'll have the ability to carry the produce home if they have to ride a bus, that their house is within walking distance of a bus stop, and that they are strong enough to carry a few spaghetti squash home, that they have the necessary kitchen equipment to prepare the produce, and they have some basic cooking skills to prepare the food. My grandpa, he's a mechanical engineer. He's one of the smartest men I've ever met. Through sheer stubbornness or force of will, has resolutely refused to cook anything or to learn how to cook anything for 77 years. If my grandma wasn't around, the only thing my papa has shown that he is able to cook with any consistency is Hot Pockets. His diet would swiftly change from eating 5 fruits and vegetables a day, because my grandma's well aware of the food guidance, to eating maybe 5 a week, maybe. If they had an apple next to the Hot Pockets at the grocery store, he might pick one up. I'm not sure. So what I'm driving at here is when we develop programs and policies, it's really important to consider all of those other factors that create the situation that we have a policy that's meant to address. So it's great if we have the senior farmers market nutrition program, but we have to make sure people can get to the farmers markets. Okay. There's no standard set of factors that we can point to and say, we've got it. These are the most important inputs to discerning a person's lifelong health outcomes. But the determinants that are shown on this slide are very important. We know that when we look at all of these inputs, we can kind of gauge a person's opportunity to live a healthy life. Some seem super obvious, of course. Health systems and services have an impact on your health. And you may be making the connection, okay, if I don't live close to the doctor, if I live in a medical provider desert, of course that's going to have an impact on my health. But it's more complicated than that as well. So if you're a member of the LGBTQIA community, perhaps you live near a provider, but the provider is not a welcoming space. So you still don't have equitable access to health systems and services. Or you have limited English proficiency and your physician doesn't provide consistent interpretation services, which is a violation of federal law, but it still happens. You don't have equitable access to health systems and services. We know that there's a strong correlation between income and wealth and health. But some of these factors are a little more complicated than they may seem on their face. So, and I'll ask, does anyone kind of want to take a gander at some of the connections between transportation and health, for example?
I'll throw my hat in the ring, I guess. If somebody doesn't have access to a car, can't ride a bike, and particularly during an event or some kind of challenge that similar to what COVID presented, where riding buses made people feel uncomfortable or unsafe, rather than being able to go to Aldi's or to Walmart or to Giant Eagle, they're grocery shopping at Country Fair and at whatever corner. There are grocery corner stores, absolutely, but for a majority of people, they're not in close proximity to that and would instead be grocery shopping at a place that none of us would expect to carry any kind of nutritious food.
Yeah, that's a great connection. Thank you. Does anyone else want to That's one really strong connection between transportation and health. Like if you don't have reliable transportation, it's really difficult in the plethora of food deserts we have in Erie County to access healthy food. If you don't have reliable transportation, you might not be able to get to work. And if you can't get to work, you might not have access to health insurance. There's a lot of ways that transportation impacts our health. Does anyone else have something to add there? We do know that a lot of a person's lifelong health outcomes can be predicted based on the neighborhood that they grew up in, the neighborhood that they were born in and most of their childhood. And again, like access to healthy foods slots under so many of these social determinants, including physical environment, the ability to grow your own food, the proximity of shops where you can buy healthy foods, social environment, the community you grow up in, the community of people you're around. What is the diet of the people around you? What is being modeled? Income and wealth, of course, transportation we discussed, even education on some level. So to kind of draw out this neighborhood you live in has an impact on your lifelong health point, I wanted to feature this tool from the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation. It has a really neat tool where you can input your address, where you grew up, and it estimates your life expectancy. There's some incredibly stark disparities that exist in Erie County in terms of life expectancy based on the neighborhood you grew up in. So if you live at the address of the health department, 606 West 2nd Street, your life expectancy is 74.5 years. If you lived at my address in Northeast Township, and I grew up in Northeast, which is the 25-minute drive from work. Uh-oh. Thanks, Alex. There we go. Okay, here's our social determinants. Thank you, Alex. Okay. So anyway, 16507, your life expectancy is 74.5 years. If you live in Northeast Township, 25 minutes away, I know because I drive every day, your life expectancy is 5 years longer. So I get in the car, I drive 25 minutes, I've added 5 years to my life. If you live in 16501, the poorest zip code in the United States of America, your life expectancy is 72.5 years. And so if I grow up in 16501, I was born, raised in the 16501 zip code, and decide that I would like to live in 16428 in my adult life. No, 16428 is the zip code for Northeast. I raise my family there, my children are born there, they go to school there, and that's where my children live their lives. On average, barring all other factors, my children can expect to live 7 years longer than I will. A 25-minute move can add 7 years to your life. I think that that's pretty sobering, and it really kind of draws out the extreme health disparities that exist just in Erie County. And I'm going to touch on those health disparities a little bit more, but before we get there, I think it's important to take a look at a few historical maps, because we can't have a robust conversation about health equity without including a lens of the structural inequality that has led to this place. So I know some of you are familiar with redlining, but for those of you who aren't, I'll give an outline of what redlining was. Redlining was a racist lending practice spearheaded by the Federal Housing Administration in the 30s and 40s that refused to insure mortgages in and near African-American neighborhoods and neighborhoods with a high density of immigrant families. So the Federal Housing Administration rolled out these redlining maps, and then they were adopted by the VA, so VA mortgages, and then traditional lenders adopted these maps as well. Not only did the FHA refuse to insure mortgages for homes that existed in the red and yellow areas, they also subsidized builders who produced subdivisions in the blue and green areas for white people, with the requirement that none of these homes be sold to African-American or immigrant families. This practice destroyed a growing Black and to a smaller extent, immigrant middle class Because for the middle class in America, the way to gain and pass down generational wealth is through home ownership. Green and blue neighborhoods were desirable because they had no or few Black or immigrant families. As you can see, A2 is the frontier neighborhood on the map. So as you can see, the frontier neighborhood was one of the most desirable neighborhoods in the city of Erie, and it still has some of the highest housing prices in the city. Again, lenders wouldn't approve mortgages for homes in the red or yellow areas, and these areas still have the highest incidences of urban blight, which meant people not only couldn't sell their homes and move to a more desirable neighborhood, the value of the homes they owned severely depreciated, while homes in the blue and green neighborhood increased in value, especially because basic supply and demand. You've limited the stock of homes that you can get a mortgage for. So I'm sure you're wondering on some level, why are we touching on this? Because the reverberations of this practice have had significant outcomes on the health of Erie residents, and it's still being felt to this day. So what I'm going to show you, this is the historical redlining map for Erie County. These are the maps from the 2018 Community Health Needs Assessment. This is the most recent data we have. You can see that the red and yellow areas match pretty neatly with the darkest parts on the map. So on the tobacco use rates map and the children living in poverty map, the areas that are the darkest are the highest occurrence rates. So tobacco use rates are highest in the dark areas of the map. There's the most children living in poverty in the dark areas of the map. On the life expectancy map, the darkest areas have the lowest life expectancy. When you eliminate the middle class, when you eliminate generational wealth, when you cease investment in an area, the repercussions are immense. Of course, there's easy connections we can draw here. No generational wealth makes it harder to achieve educational advancement, to build a business, or attend an institution of higher education. But there's also connections between the reduction of property values and the quality of education afforded. When we reduce property values, we reduce the tax base. There's connections between poverty incidence rates and the density of tobacco and alcohol retailers. We know that there's more tobacco and alcohol retailers in neighborhoods with higher poverty rates. And when we eliminate jobs that pay family sustaining wages, then we know that tobacco use rates increase. People who have lower incomes smoke tobacco at higher rates. And so corporations followed their white collar workers to the suburbs because the land was cheaper, it was an easier commute, and they could get insured mortgages. Oh, okay. So this is the redlining map again. These are our food deserts. This is the most current food desert data. The USDA just updated this in 2021. Alex is nodding. Yes, that's correct. Okay, good. I think this is a really powerful comparison tool. We have so many food deserts in the city of Erie at this point, and most of them exist in neighborhoods that have been redlined since the 30s. With the rise of the supermarket and the decline of the neighborhood grocery shop, development has followed the same patterns as these redlining maps. Retailers will claim that with the higher crime rates in urban areas, they just can't absorb the loss of profit that occurs by maintaining an urban location. However, this is just a personal supposition. We know that the ethnic grocery stores have been able to maintain locations downtown. Retailers set up shop in locations where they can reach their target consumers. Perhaps urbanites, at least in Erie County, are not the target consumers of major retailers. This was the last grocery store in the city of Erie. I just wanted to show a picture of Sure Find in Westgate. It closed in 2016, I think 2016, yep. There's no coincidence that the food deserts in the city closely mirror the historical redlining maps. Retailers followed the suburbanites out of the urban core and took advantage of land at less costly prices to expand store sizes, increase offerings, and pass the cost savings on to consumers. In an industry with a 1 to 2% profit margin, this was great for retailers, great for suburbanites, and awful for those left in the city who couldn't sell their homes and couldn't get new mortgages. In many cases, retailers were able to purchase land at incredibly affordable rates because they speculated that the suburbs would be built up around them. With the federal investment and development, especially the suburbs in the post-World War II area, this supposition paid off. Redlining wasn't outlawed until the 60s. Supermarket redlining has never been outlawed. There's no federal mandate that retailers have to diversify the locations that they offer their services. So now we're going to transition a little bit. I'll pause there if anyone has any questions they want to ask right away about the redlining maps, but I'm going to transition to just highlighting some disparity data.
Olivia, this is Katie Chris asking, are there, you said there are no federal mandates for where grocers need to locate themselves. Do other countries mandate where grocery stores need to be located?
No, I don't. As far as I know, no. But just speaking from personal experience, any other country that I've lived in, there's not the major supermarkets that we have here. It's like our home in Cairo. When I want to buy vegetables, I go to the green grocer. When I want meat, I go to the butcher. When I want bread, I go to the baker. They don't have supermarkets in the same way we have in the States. And the same was true in China and in Bahrain and the Gulf as well. So perhaps in Europe there is, but I can't answer that question authoritatively.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I thought it was important to pull some of our data around food access, food insecurity, chronic diseases, and the disparities that exist in Erie County. I'm not asking you all to problem solve this today, but I think it's really important to keep it in mind. In some ways, disparity data gives us a really great point to develop targeted outreach that can really change the landscape of our communities. So I don't want you to look at this as pessimistic. I think this is great. Now we know where to focus more of our energy. For example, adults who make less than $15,000 a year qualify for at least some level of supplemental nutritional assistance. They income qualify. So what about SNAP isn't working that's causing this level of food insecurity in those living in poverty? I don't know, but it's an interesting question. Why do Erie County's Black residents experience food insecurity at such a significantly different level? This sort of comparison is super important when we're doing policy work because it allows us to really pull out which policies have not been equitable in the past and ask the questions, what changes can be made in the future to increase equitable access? On this slide I just highlighted, we see that there's a wealth disparity here, 29% versus 11%. There's a disparity between city residents and county residents. There's a disparity between Black residents and white residents. And there's a significant disparity between educational attainment. So we know those who haven't earned a high school degree, food insecurity at 14%, whereas those with a college degree are only experiencing food insecurity at 4%, which leads me to believe that perhaps there's a health literacy problem around navigating those federal systems that allow you to access food. And then in the center, we see 10% of Erie County adults experience food insecurity. Okay. I also grabbed this data because I thought it was interesting. We know that 12% of Erie County adults eat fruits and vegetables 5 or more times a day. However, Black Erie County residents eat fruits and vegetables at a much higher rate, 18%. So that's interesting because we see that 22% of Erie County's Black residents experience food insecurity, but 18% of Erie County's Black residents eat fruits or vegetables 5 or more times a day, which is the highest among any of the groups based on age, based on educational attainment, based on wealth. This is the highest population group. If we separate people out, Black people by race eat fruits and vegetables at the highest amount. So it's an interesting conversation we could have around diet, around dietary preferences, and about when we allow people access to food, what food are they choosing? Okay. And adults over 65, and I think you all know this pretty well, eat fruits and vegetables at a much lower rate. So if you're looking at this data, where are you focusing your energy first? What gaps seem the most pressing? How do we address it? Does anyone have any solutions right off the top of their head? No, that's okay. Okay, I also pulled a couple sets of data around chronic diseases because I think that we're all well aware of the connections between food access, food insecurity, and chronic disease rates. 90 to 95% of adults in America with diagnosed diabetes have type 2 diabetes. Additionally, we know that 24% of those living with diabetes have not been diagnosed. So we're missing about a quarter of the population who has diabetes. They haven't been diagnosed with it, which is why when I looked at the income statistics, $25,000 to $49,000 a year, $49,999,000 earned a year at 17% was actually the highest amount among, if we break up people by income. Those who earn less than $15,000 a year, we're only at 12% of the population had been diagnosed with diabetes. But I wasn't sure if that was painting an accurate picture, because how many people in that population who earn less than $15,000 a year have gone undiagnosed? And I also just wanted to pull out, of course, we know that as people increase diabetes rates, or as people age, diabetes rates increase. There's a significant difference in educational attainment, 16% versus 9%. That tells us a story. And of course, Black Erie County residents experience diabetes at higher rates than white Erie County residents. And these are all disparities that we really have to take a look at and wonder, what does this tell us about access to medical care? What does this tell us about access to healthy foods? What does this tell us about historical redlining? Okay, I didn't want to inundate you with too much data. So for the rest of these, because I'm a little bit of a data nerd. So for the rest of these, I only pulled out a few statistics because I didn't want to get too in the weeds with this. But I couldn't leave it alone, this educational gradation, because I think that this story is fascinating. The education level ties to blood pressure are wild because we're seeing a 25% difference. There's nothing medically that says you haven't completed your high school degree, you're probably going to have high blood pressure. There's no medical correlation there. There's no sensible correlation there. So why do college graduates only have been told they've had high blood pressure at 28%, and those who have completed some high school at 53%? That's absolutely wild to me. So I really want to do I don't know if you think that's as wild as I do, but like that statistic just really, really jumped out at me. And of course, we're seeing this around income. We see this as people age, and women in general experience hypertension at less levels than men. Erie County adults overall, 35% of Erie County adults are experiencing hypertension or high blood pressure. So I just want to pull out that disparity data. I think it's really important, again, just to be mindful of it as we're developing programming, as we're doing community outreach. When we're aware of the systems that exist, we can start to change them. When we know what isn't working, we can fix it. When we know about the disparities and the unequal health outcomes that plague our communities, we can address them. We can develop targeted outreach that doesn't just address the problem, but the root causes that created the problem in the first place. Equality sounds fair. Equity is fair. So, what next? And I'm going to apologize to those of you who attended a community health improvement plan session last week, because I'm going to be a little repetitive for just a minute or two. The Erie County Department of Health is interested in forming a community advisory board so that we can put into practice one of my favorite framings for my work. Don't go into communities to fix something until you've asked what they need. You can't fix people. People aren't things. They don't need fixing. You have to work with people. If you'd like to be part of a communities of solution effort, if you'd like to help us drive our work in the direction that will be the most impactful and meaningful for our community, then please reach out to me. You can serve on our community advisory board. Here's my contact information, my email, my phone number. I hope that was interesting enough and everyone got some information they can use. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you so much, Olivia. That was a phenomenal presentation and just really educational. As we mentioned, we're going to open up the floor now to the Q&A. If you have time, Olivia, I don't know what your schedule is or if you have time to stay for a little bit longer, but anyone that's interested, we have some questions that were sent in prior to this meeting as well as via the chat. So we have some questions on hand, but if anybody's interested that's here, just unmute yourself and go right ahead. There might be a little bit of steps on toes, but.
Okay, I'll kick off with a question. So your hypertension, high blood pressure correlation with education, you didn't see that with insulin?
One second. Oh, I didn't mute myself. There wasn't as significant a correlation. There was, but it wasn't nearly as significant as the hypertension, high blood pressure. With that being said, I think we could posit a supposition that diabetes is severely underdiagnosed.
That's
and so
screening.
Hypertension is easy to catch. If you go to the doctor, they're going to take your blood pressure. They're not always checking your blood sugar levels.
Or if you're just waiting in a pharmacy, right? They got the blood pressure cuffs there, right? To follow up with your doctor later. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Excellent question. All right. Well, I have a couple questions here from before and during the chat. So for you, Olivia, and Alex too, I guess if you guys are both working in the health department, but for you, Olivia, what is the most impactful or efficient policies that you've seen in Erie County or in Pennsylvania or in general that you think might have a bright future here in Erie? Or like policies that might, or programs that might be already underway that you think need more focus and investment?
That's a good question.
And I'm going to ask you to repeat it, please.
Good.
There were a lot of words there.
Yeah, sorry. So if you were to pick one policy, what is the most impactful or efficient policy that you've seen either in Erie County or in Pennsylvania or just in general that you think has a bright future here in Erie County? It could be something that's already here or something that you have recognized from a different city and you think has a bright future here.
I'll touch on briefly. There's one program that they're using really successfully in North Carolina that I think could be successful nationwide. It's called Faithful Families. And the program looks at healthy movement and healthy eating and pairs a health educator, or a public health professional with a lay leader from a congregation, either a church, a temple, a mosque, because recognizing that populations that experience diabetes, high blood pressure, hypertension at higher incidence rates also generally are historically distrustful of government entities for good reason. So you send a health educator to pair with a trusted community member, and they create solutions of like communities of change within these like faith communities. It's pretty infectious. And the program not only does it have this curriculum aspect, and there's talking about like meal planning and budgeting and how to read food labels, but there's also a policy component. So for the programming to be considered faithful families, the worship, the congregation body has to initiate policy changes. So it can be something as simple as every meal that we serve to the community, we're going to offer fruit, or more complicated, we're going to build walking trails around our congregation. We're going to form walking groups. So something like we're going to add 5 minutes of stretching or yoga before every meeting. And I think that that's a really neat way to begin to build trust and work with communities that have been historically distrustful of public health professionals.
I also think that model of meeting people where they're at to make change is really important. So whether it's meeting people with their faith-based organization or meeting them with their work site or whatever the case might be, and just making like small incremental steps. I also think getting buy-in from community leaders and that like lay leader model of health change and behavior change is really effective. There have been some programs in, especially in inner cities where people don't have access to healthcare, where barbers and hairstylists have been trained on health, just like brief intervention trainings. And they're able to talk to clients while they're getting their hair cut about if they're at risk for blood pressure, if they're at risk for diabetes, making small lifestyle changes, things like that. So.
Awesome. Thank you. And we just got another question in here. If you wouldn't mind just elaborating a little bit more on the actual like definition or of what health disparity is, just for everybody to kind of be on the same page.
Sure. So I'll give you the operating definition we use from the CDC, and then I'll give you an anecdote to kind of flesh that out. So health disparities are the preventable is a really important word, differences in burden of disease, injury, violence, or opportunities to achieve optimal health that are experienced by socially disadvantaged populations. So let's talk about a health disparity that just exists based on geographical location. So Mary is a 55-year-old woman. She lives in the Frontier Park area. She eats fruits and vegetables 5 times a day. She loves them. David is a 55-year-old man. He lives on a 7th and Sass, which would be wild because he's on the Gannon campus. But that's where he lives. He doesn't have access to fruits and vegetables, so he eats them maybe 2-3 times a week. David doesn't dislike fruits and vegetables. He doesn't hate broccoli. He doesn't have a phobia of apples. But just based on location and access to healthy foods, David's not able to achieve optimal health. I'm calling you out specifically. Yeah. So that's kind of a health disparity. That's something preventable. Let's give David a car. Let's teach David how to ride a bike. Let's put a farmer's market in the courtyard of Gannon. There's lots of ways that we can shift this, but that health disparity exists because there is a lack of opportunity to achieve optimal health.
That's awesome. And I see there are some notes being dropped in the chat relating to the last point that you made about meeting people where they're at with community and faith-based organizations. And with what you just said, Olivia, I've been, to add anecdotally, I've been just like researching habits and understanding what makes people more productive, more efficient. And one central theme around that is that environment trumps will. You know, it doesn't really matter how motivated you are if your environment is not set up to change your trajectory in a direction that you want. It's not going to happen. That change will not manifest itself. So that is exactly, you're just adding to that idea, I suppose. So is there any other questions? I have, I think one more here, but is there anybody that has any questions or has been putting them in the chat? Go ahead and submit your last one. All right, I have the last one here, and it is about the USDA food deserts map. I know that you mentioned that's very new data, so I don't know if that has been, this question is, you showed the most recent USDA food deserts map. What has changed? And I know that, like you said, that's very recent data, but has it been getting better? Has it been getting worse? I think that's kind of what they meant by that question.
I'll kick off on that, but I'll let Alex jump in because she's a little bit more familiar. It's getting worse since the last time they did the food desert map. I think, Alex, did we go from 7 to 12?
I don't have it in front of me. We went from 10 in the city and 12 in the county to, and I don't have it in front of me, but I want to say 23 in the city and like 26 in the county. But I know it about doubled in the city.
So yeah, it's getting worse, not better.
And the one thing that I want to remind everybody regarding that data is the map was previously updated in either 2015 or based on 2015 or 2016 data. It was updated in April of 2021, but that was based on 2019 data, which is still the most recent available. It is a significant update, but just to keep in mind that the data, for those of us who've been working in food access and paying attention to this kind of stuff for the last few years, nothing significant has changed. The data that we have now more accurately reflects what we've been seeing the last couple of years, right? Like the Surefine grocery store that closed in 2016. I think that's right because I know it was still there in 2014 when I lived downtown. So that sounds about right. So that grocery store leaving would have created more food deserts in that community. So the data is just more accurate and more up to date now.
In 2019 would have been pre-COVID, so that's
yes,
assuming that things haven't gotten even worse since then.
Correct.
Wow. Well, those are the questions that I have. If anyone else has any, feel free to let us know via the chat, or Olivia has her contact information, has presented that. Olivia, would you mind putting that in the chat as well? I'm not sure if you already did or not, but that way everyone can screenshot it or copy and paste it. Awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much, Olivia, for presenting and kind of unveiling some of the history of why Erie's food system is the way that it is. You know, that's at the pith of the story, I think, is right in that, in the redlining. But you never really hear about that. You know, I don't think anybody would see those maps unless somebody is putting it directly in front of their face. It's not something that people are proud of. It's not something that we want to confront, I think, most of the time. So that's really awesome that you were able to gather so much data. So we're going to move on to any other discussion points that anyone else has. And again, before we leave, to remind everyone, I just want to remind everyone that nominations, again, can be made from the floor today during this meeting, as well as via email to myself or to the Erie FPAC Gmail. I'll put those in the chat by Friday, June 11th at 5 p.m. And then we're going to vote the week of June 14th, and we'll announce the officers at our next general FPAC meeting, which is July 14th. So if anyone else has any discussion material, any updates, want to continue this discussion, go ahead. We're going to open the floor to anyone that has updates. Awesome. And Olivia, would you mind discussing a little bit more about that? Actually, that reminds me of the Community Advisory Board. What will that entail? What will their objectives be?
So I really want this to be community driven. So as we're kind of bringing this project on board, I want to make sure that I have some core members, and we're going to sort of derive the direction together of the Community Advisory Board. But essentially, the Community Advisory Board is going to function to make sure that what we're doing is what the community wants and needs. So it's saying, like, for example, we'll use community garden plots as an example. So it's like, okay, we want to build, we're thinking that this is a great area to put in a community garden. And we have someone who lives in that neighborhood on the Community Advisory Board. They say, actually, I know that every single one of my neighbors works 14 hours a day. They're not going to garden. They don't want to garden. Can we try to work with retailers instead and get some healthier options in the store? Can we talk to Country Fair and see what we can do there? So it's like, that sort of input, because as like public health professionals, we get really into best practices and sometimes miss the mark on what community members actually want and need from us. And in the interest of full disclosure, the demographics of the workforce at the health department does not accurately reflect the communities that we serve. So we want to make sure that we're having those diverse voices guiding our work. Because like I said, you can't go into communities and tell people what they need. People will tell you what they need. That's my short and brief synopsis of the Community Advisory Board. But seriously, you join, tell your grandma to join, bring your best friend. I want everybody there.
Any and all stakeholders. That sounds pretty awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Olivia. And if there aren't any other discussion points, I guess we're going to close this meeting. You guys will know that we'll have, I don't know if we'll send out a follow-up email, but we have a recording on YouTube of this meeting, and we'll share that via that link via the follow-up email. So if anyone missed some of the contact info or wanted to receive some of the data that Olivia has shared, I'm not sure if that's all open to available. Okay, sweet. Just reach out to her or to Erie FPAC and we can try and get that information too. So thank you, Olivia, again. Thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you next month. Again, don't forget about those nominations, and next month we'll be announcing our newly elected leadership team. So, all right, well, everyone have a good evening. Enjoy the weather, except for those of the storm. Try to stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.